Opposition parties are talking about holding a historic national convention. This is coming up in August. It will be over 2 days. Let's find out more about this now and speak to DA Chief Whip Siviwe Gwarube and leader of the IFP, Velenkosini Hlabisa. Thank you so much to you both for your time. I'll start with you, Bab Hlabisa. Why is this gathering important in your view?
Good evening, Bongiwe, my colleague Siviwe, and the viewers of SABC News. Bongiwe, as we all know, we are heading for 2024 elections next year. All the indications indicate that it will be highly impossible for the ruling party to get 50 plus 1% simply because of the way it has failed our people from many angles. Crime, unemployment, inflation, load shedding. Now, as responsible political parties, we feel we should not wait to be found unprepared, to be caught unprepared. We do not want to see a country that will have vote of no confidence one after the other. Bongiwe, if Johannesburg was South Africa, we will be a joke in the world. 4 mayors over 16 months. Why? The councillors in Johannesburg were found unprepared. And even now, they are not doing all that takes to ensure stability and service delivery in Johannesburg. We cannot longer afford to have South Africa that will be unstable, that will have vote of no confidence now and again, if indeed the ruling party fails to get 50 plus 1%. Therefore, we feel we must start preparations for the future.
Siviwe, listening to Bab Hlabisa and of course reading the joint statement that was released by yourselves as opposition parties, while you say that many citizens are anxious about the future and you continue of course to say that they want certainty that the new national government will be stable, viable and effective. But some say that the opposition is not even an option for them because it has nothing to offer. How do you respond?
Good evening, Bongiwe, and to the viewers. I think actually we probably are seeing, this is probably the most exciting thing to happen to opposition politics in a very, very long time. Because for the first time, we are seeing opposition parties saying, look, going to the electorate and saying, look, here is the path to victory. Where in the past, for instance, where political parties would go and campaign to voters, while you would essentially say, sell your proposition, but you couldn't credibly say that we will be replacing the ANC at the polls. But for the first time, Bongiwe, now I think voters can trust that there is momentum behind the opposition. I think also if you start to look at what we've been able to do in KwaZulu-Natal, where we've had working relationships, for instance, with the IFP, you start to see that there actually are alternatives. And ours now is to show the electorate that there is an alternative outside of the ANC. And so I think for me, the importance of working together as an opposition is to show voters that there's a realistic way in which they can get under and away from the ANC and that you can have coherence within the opposition bloc.
Talking about, realistic, Siviwe, I'm going to stay with you. There is, of course, that realistic challenge that all of you are facing, all political parties, and that is to get young people interested in voting, because we saw what happened in the previous election. How do you plan on doing this?
Absolutely. I think, I think recently News 24 had released a statistic about how 14 million young people did not show up at the polls in the last election. And I think, Bongiwe, that is something that as political parties we have to take seriously. Because ultimately, if more and more South Africans are starting to disengage from the political process of casting their vote, or they're starting to not see that there's a difference in how they vote and how they live, then it means that we are not doing well enough to showcase that where we govern, we can do better. And so for us, I think as the DA, one of the key things that we're going to be doing is to showcasing where we have been able to get into government, what we've been able to do. We've been able to get into government in the Western Cape, in the city of Cape Town for uninterrupted years. And we have been able to tangibly show that where you live in the Western Cape, when you live in Cape Town, you are likely more to get a job than if you live anywhere else. And so those are the things that we're going to have to go to young people with, to say that while they may be less nostalgic for them about, the party of the struggle and the party of their forebears, they may be less nostalgic about that, but they want practical solutions to their problems. How are we going to solve the energy crisis? How are we going to solve the joblessness crisis? And that, I think, is where we've got to provide the itch where it scratches.
Now, Hlabisa, one of the things that, of course, we've seen in the past, and Siviwe is talking about issues of, the DA, way it governs and all of that. But there is an issue that we've seen in the past where some of those who would be in coalition governments with the Democratic Alliance are saying that it is acting like the big brother when it is supposed to have the parties all on the same equal footing. Your statement, as you've released it, the joint statement that is just talking about robust engagements. I wonder how robust will the conversations be, particularly around this issue of starting on an equal footing and not one being seen as more important than the others.
Even the current leadership of the DA knows we are able to draw a line to say you can't cross here, and we have indicated in the bilateral meetings between the IFP and the DA regarding how things developed at COJ, where we clearly spelled out to the Democratic Alliance that it has to change in a big brother attitude. But that was a closed meeting. I want to assure you and the people of South Africa, we will never allow any of the political party to dictate as a big brother. You remember the issue of EFF, when they wanted to dictate on us, we said, no, you can't do that, because we no longer allow anyone to behave as a big brother when it comes to issues of politics.
And what does this pact, Hlabisa, look like? Before I go back to Siviwe, take us behind closed doors. These particular conversations, are these conversations that are saying we agree on everything, or where we do not agree, we simply can go our own way? What's going on here as you've been having exploratory meetings?
The process is still on, Bongi, when by the time the convention sits, we will have made a considerable progress. We have requested people with a long experience on coalition government across the globe to become part of this coalition discussion so that they can share with us experiences of what works in a coalition and what does not work in a coalition. These people will be engaging us from now, because we are certain who are they. It's only a matter of protocol. I can't disclose, but we are certain who are they. They will be working with us up until the sitting of the coalition.
And Siviwe, of course, this is something that you've also been working on, that issue of coalitions, and you and I have spoken about this on the show as well. Let's talk about that. These exploratory meetings for the Democratic Alliance, what have they entailed? And I know, of course, as Hlabisa says, it's still at talking stages at the moment.
Yeah. Look, I think, what has been really obvious to us, Bongiwe, and has been a learning curve, as Hlabisa is saying, is that there have been many lessons to have been learnt that came out of the city of Johannesburg and the debacle around that. One of which is that we've got to find ways and means to stabilize coalition governments. And being able to bring together an opposition bloc ahead of an election period is actually one way of doing that. As I remember, I had said on the show last week that one of the biggest challenges in forming governments in South Africa is that you are often given only 14 days to form a government. And in that time, if there's no outright winner of the elections, then you are sitting and shoddily putting together coalition agreements that may not stand the test of time. But what we are doing now is, as Ubab Hlabisa says, we are sitting down to map out what does a post-ANC South Africa looks like. And ultimately, Bongiwe, I think what has combined the opposition and really given us, the motivation to work together is because there is no other option. I think political parties that are serious in South Africa have to ask themselves, how do we sell a different South African future? Because the matters could not be more urgent. And so that's what the importance of this is. Of course, there are other means and ways to stabilize coalitions, like coalition agreements, like legislation. But I think having an agreement or a meeting of the minds even before election season is important.
But Hlabisa, very briefly, there is the likelihood, though, that the polls could be wrong. Is the convention also discussing that?
Well, we are open-minded, Bongiwe, but if you look at the election results, look at 2021 at a local government level, 2019 national government level, the people of South Africa really will have to make a decision. I heard when you said some people say there is no other alternative. Such people will stay for years under load shedding, unemployment, crime. 14 million young people are not participating in the voting process. Those are the people whom we will be appealing, activating them, that be part. It's a shame to have graduates who are sitting at home. You know, a graduate who is sitting at home will never say there is no other alternative, but rather try other political parties. And the response, Bongiwe, in the by-elections where we are strong in KwaZulu-Natal, they tell us ANC members are moving to vote IFP. We are taking the wards that were overwhelmingly won by ANC, and they give their vote to the IFP because they say enough is enough.
All right, let me thank you both for your time. Unfortunately, we're out of time, but do appreciate your time this afternoon. That was DA Chief Whip Siviwe Gwarube and leader of the IFP, Velenkosini Hlabisa.